And I wondered if that's a conscious strategy. Is that something someone sat down, or a group of people sits down and writes it out? I suspect it isn't. You could maybe describe it as a sort of market failure, even, that our strategy has emerged as that. And do we need a 10-year plan? Do we need something written out to say, this is what we're going to do, this is the first step?
Yes. Britain doesn't do strategy, hopelessly weak in strategic thinking, but the City of London does do strategy, and they're very, very good. Our research, when we went through the archives, makes it, I think, you won't find a smoking gun document saying, this is Britain's tax haven development strategy. You won't find that, but you will find a constant, not coincidence, but a clear pattern. As I showed through a couple of the slides I demonstrated, where key institutions who have been shaping our tax policies and our regulatory policies and so on have been pushing this. It's not coincidence, by the way, that at the time when Tax Justice Network has, partly as a result of our work on the $21 trillion, which went global, and it became a massive news story, back come the tax haven interests, Francis Maud and the Institute of Economic Affairs. There's a conference happening on Tuesday this coming week on why tax havens are such a good thing for Britain and blah, blah, blah. This is orchestrated by a very, very powerful lobby. And it's clear, if you go back to the 1970s and earlier, within the Institute of Economic Affairs, funded, by the way, by someone, Anthony Fisher. Anyone heard of Anthony Fisher? Founder of the Montpellier Society, a chicken farmer, the man who brought battery chicken farming into Britain. He made a fortune and spent that fortune on ultra-libertarian politics, including the promotion of tax havens. He ended up in the Caymans trying to farm cows and create a dairy farm in Cayman Islands, which was a spectacular failure. He's one of, he was a fanatical libertarian out of the Ayn Rand school of libertarian thinking. There's no government like no government. And I think you'll find it deeply embedded in many of Britain's institutions, our think tanks like the Adam Smith Institute, the Institute of Economic Affairs, and many university departments. There are people who think that tax havens are a very good thing, on the grounds that it oils the wheels of global capitalism. Now, I'm a great engine enthusiast, and I have to oil the engines and grease things and this, that, and other, but oil the wheels of global capitalism, what does that mean in real terms? The minute you stop to think about it, you realize this is complete nonsense. Capital moves from one country to another at the flick of a button. What they mean is tax havens have been the battering rams with which we have been able to break regulation in Britain, to begin with, then in America, then the rest of Europe, and then around the world, and de-tax capital. So capital doesn't pay tax, the rest of us do. So I think there has been a clear, and people like Ari Neve, I mentioned him earlier on, Enoch Powell and so on, they were quite clearly tax haven enthusiasts. They saw this as Britain's strategy. They had been bought in by the City of London. The lobbying effort that the City of London has put into promoting Britain's tax havens has been absolutely massive. You'll find many, many ministers in the current government are tax haven users. Andrew Mitchell, no longer a minister, he is, his family, the Cameron family, the Osborne family. You go through the government, you'll find that all users of tax havens. So it's deeply embedded in British capital. I think the vast majority of British capital, frankly, now sits offshore Britain. And we call it, when Cameron talks about Britain attracting foreign investment, he's talking about Britain attracting my own money back out of Jersey and the Cayman Islands.
A related question is really, if we're going to fight against this kind of mentality that this is how we run our economy, I think we have to have good arguments. I think you presented them already. But maybe something I haven't grasped is, what's the financial rationale for moving to this tax haven economy? And I find it hard to believe that all the economists over the decades in government have sort of been unaware that it's damaging the economy. I mean, Have they consciously said, well, we're going to let Britain go down the toilet? You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm being devil's advocate here, so I'm really looking for some concrete answers.
In one chapter, we talk about Keynes's work on capital controls. A reference was made by an American Keynesian economist to Britain being taken over by a curious conservative sect of economists. And the editor, Dan Hyde, wrote in a comment alongside that, is there any other kind of conservative cult other than the curious? I mean, it does seem to me extraordinary. I spent 7 years at university studying trade and investment theory. And I've read many, many books on trade and investment theory and globalization. And none of them mention tax havens. I stand up at conferences, World Bank, IMF, and so on, and time again, for decades I've been talking about tax havens like some kind of sad old bore. And, you know, totally ignored. What's going on here? What they all argue is tax competition is a good thing. Tax havens bring tax competition. Have you heard David Cameron? This is his latest thing. Britain must be tax competitive. Funny word, competition. In the economic sense, it comes out of the microeconomic theory of the firm. Firms compete with one another to give consumers a choice. Countries do not compete with one another. Countries do not compete by bidding against one another in tax rules and regulatory rules to bring the race to the bottom. That way chaos lies. That way you get a repetition of the bidding wars, the exchange rate wars of the 1930s, which led to the economic collapses. That's the game we're playing. It's a very, very dangerous game we're involved in. We're bidding the cost of capital down by giving them all these subsidies, switching the tax burden onto labour and consumers. This can only inevitably lead to two things. One is higher labour costs compared to capital, in other words, lower rates of job creation, and secondly, higher rates of inequality, and the inevitable collapse that will follow from that. This is an extremely dangerous economic development strategy that will follow. But yet, I never hear any challenges to this. The only challenge I've ever heard was myself in 2007 on the Today programme. Richard Lambert from the Confederation of British Industry was there in January 2007 saying how fantastic, how wonderful the City of London is. We must give them tax breaks to make them competitive. We must deregulate to make them competitive. And John Humphrey said, what do you think about that, Mr. Christensen? I said, well, you know, as an economist, I don't buy this because if the City of London wants to be competitive in the world market, it should lower its fees, which are the highest in the world. That's the way you compete in microeconomic theory, through price competition. And it should improve the services, which are crap. Frankly, the City of London is really, really bad at what it does. It's not coincidence that the financial market collapse happened in London, that AIG, the American insurance group, collapsed as a result of its London activities. Same with Merrill Lynch. It was in London that the really toxic activities were happening. But no, this has been our development strategy. Rather than promoting real microeconomic competition within the City of London, we've been subsidising. And then come the crash, we had to bail them out. So the biggest subsidy in all time history. And I think that I love devil's advocates, but no, I mean, the arguments just don't stack up. And I don't understand why our economists in the universities haven't been taking this on. Apart from the fact that you look at most of the key professors, there's one in particular at Oxford University, the Oxford Centre for Business Taxation, which we call the Oxford Centre for Business Non-Taxation. It is funded largely by business. They are largely there promoting the tax competition. They are saying that we should cut our tax rates to be competitive. Far from actually making Britain more competitive, it just takes the pressure off our capitalist class to invest in productive activity.
Thank you. We're